Hey everybody, welcome back to Blu-Roy Movies. Welcome to a wet weekend in Warwickshire. Now that could be the name. Oh, it's Mrs. Blu-Roy with a cup of tea. Oh, no bacon sandwich.
I've got time.
I think that was a no then. Anyway, on with the show. Wet weekend in Warwickshire, but it's not a complete washout because I've got my cup of tea and no bacon sandwich, but we're going to talk about the weekly watches. Yes, this week I've watched 9 titles, so quite busy on the watching front. So let's get into this. Right, I started off the week with Tracker from 2010, directed by Ian Sharp, starring Ray Winstone and Tamura Morrison. A western of sorts. Well, can you call it a western? It's set in New Zealand. I suppose New Zealand is west of somewhere. So yeah, we'll keep with the western. This is about Ray Winstone's character. He's been fighting in the Boer War against the British. He was a farmer, and the British were trying to take over all the land and the farms. So after the Boer War has finished, he has moved to New Zealand, which coincidentally is like sort of a British colony in them days, and it's governed by the British. And when he gets there, there's a lot of the British soldiers recognise him because Winston, by all accounts, was quite a successful fight against the British and left a few bodies behind, which they didn't like, but it was war now, so there's not a lot they can do about it. So he wants to build himself a new life in New Zealand, where he's offered the task of tracking Tamura Morrison's character, who is a Maori, and he is accused of murder. Now, Winston then sets off tracking this guy, and it's very cat and mouse, like the Maori character familiar to the land, and that is proving difficult to track down. But Winston's really, really experienced and the best in the field, and eventually gets him and then struggles to keep him detained until he can bring him in dead or alive. To bring him in alive is going to be worth a lot more money to him, sovereigns, I think, than bringing him in dead. Then he gets to know the character, and sort of a bond forms between them, and he starts to doubt the validity of the claims of the crime against him, and then starts to side with him against the British. Yeah, really good stuff. I quite enjoyed this. Nothing that's going to blow you away, but for a Sunday morning watch that it was, it's easy watching, a decent story. Winston's in it. Winston's good in it, as he's in most things, and his South African accent I thought was quite good. Not that I'm a expert on the South African accent, probably as terrible as mine in real life. But yeah, it's a good film, good way to start the week. I would recommend it. I don't think it's that expensive to pick up. So yes, that is the Tracker, Ray Winstone. Right, next up, and for Sunday afternoon, I think it was. Yes, Sunday afternoon. And what screams more than Sunday afternoon than The Great Escape, and my first time viewing it on 4K from 1963, directed by John Sturges, and possibly the greatest cast ever put to film. Steve McQueen, James Garner, Richard Attenborough, James Donald, Charles Bronson, Donald Pleasant, James Coburn, Gordon Jackson, David McCallum. The list goes on, and as with a lot of these films, a lot of familiar faces that you know but not sure of their name. And yeah, The Great Escape, it's marvellous, isn't it? And look at heroism of these prisoners, these serial trying to escape from prisoner of war camps, and they're all put together, all the rotten eggs in one basket, as they're described, in this new camp to specifically keep them there and trying to stop them escaping. But of course, it doesn't. And just the characters in it, from Hilts, the Cooler King, Charles Bronson, the tunnel digger. And I never can. That is one thing about the film that takes me out sometimes. Like, is dug all this tunnel and how many other tunnels? I think was this his 17th tunnel. And when it comes to escaping, he's suddenly scared of going in enclosed spaces. You know, that doesn't wash for me. There's no way he'd have dug all these tunnels if that was any way going to affect him. I think my favourite character is Attenborough as Bartlett, just a cool, calculated guy who'll do his utmost to, if not escape, to cause as much trouble to the Germans and slow down their war effort in whichever way is possible. Everybody's seen this. Everybody knows it. I do like that new artwork on there. That's really good. I think there's a poster in here. I might have to put it up on the wall because behind me there I've got a blank. That's really difficult to do. Behind me there is a blank space. I need to fill that with some posters. Yeah, The Great Escape, brilliant. I wasn't really over enamoured with the 4K transfer, if I'm honest. It was good in places and pretty bad in others, but I'm glad I got it and got it in the collection now because it is the best it's ever been. I remember I had a DVD copy that was quite bad, so this is like hands and feet and whatever I'm trying to say above it. Yeah, The Great Escape. Everybody loves The Great Escape, don't they? And such a magnificent tune as well. Good Sunday afternoon fare. And next up was Flatliners from 1990, directed by Joel Schumacher, starring Kiefer Sutherland, Julia Roberts, Kevin Bacon, William Baldwin, and Oliver Platt. Now, Joel Schumacher, often derided for Batman and Robin, they call that his turkey, but I beg to differ. I think this is his turkey. I didn't like this film in one iota. I thought it was absolutely ridiculous, to be honest. Now, this is about these 5 trainee medical students who want to dabble in rendering themselves clinically dead so that after a little while they can bring each other back to life through CPR and electric shocks and all that good stuff, to try and discover if there is life after death. Do you go down this fabled tunnel and to the light sort of thing? And they start dabbling it, and then the mixture between like life and death then becomes blurred in real life, which is a good concept. And if they'd have kept it with some of the characters, like Kiefer Sutherland, after he did it, he was then sort of like terrorised by some kid that had fallen out of a tree and got killed when they were kids. They were bullied. They were bullying him. And Julia Roberts' character, she was harassed by the ghost of a dead dad sort of thing, who had shot himself in the head when Julia Roberts caught him taking heroin as a young girl. And I think the shame of this made him shoot himself, and Julia Roberts had witnessed this. But then some of the others were just ridiculous. Kevin Bacon, he was harassed then by a girl that he'd bullied as a kid that wasn't even dead, that when he turned up at her house to apologise, barely even remembered the guy. William Baldwin, he'd been videoing himself down the years, having sexual relations with all these girls, and then all these girls were coming back to harass him even though they weren't dead, and there's probably worse ways to be harassed, to be honest. Just absolutely ridiculous. Like, why? What's the point? Like, just if it's going to be like supernatural, like get some supernatural things in, not some hot chicks trying to harass you all the time. Yeah, really, really crazy. Oliver Platt's character, he never even attempted it, so I don't even know why he was there in the first place. I believe it's got a remake, which I can imagine is probably even more terrible than this. Uh, Absolutely awful. Uh, Gets the Blu-Roy movies bag of bollocks award. Flatliners, absolute bag of bollocks. And next up, another Kevin Bacon film, and one I liked a whole lot more than Flatliners, to be honest. Yeah, Death Sentence from 2007, directed by James Wan, probably more famous for the Saw movies. Yeah, starring Kevin Bacon, Garrett Hedlund, Kelly Preston, John Goodman, and yeah, good crime thriller. I quite enjoyed this. It's about Bacon's character, and he witnesses his son getting murdered in a gang style slaying. To join this gang, the initiation is you have to murder an innocent person, and Kevin Bacon's son gets murdered in like a petrol station while Kevin's filling up the car. Uh, Bacon then apprehends the gang member that killed him, uh, brings him in to face justice, but because Bacon is the only one that has seen his face, the lad who killed his son is pretty much, they're going to have to do a bargain with him because it's pretty much their word against his and circumstantial evidence. And unless they do a bargain, he's going to pretty much get off scot-free. So the worst he'd get is like just a couple of years in prison. Bacon's not having that, so he said in the trial, like, no, actually, he didn't recognise him, and then determined to bring down the gang himself in vigilante style. And yeah, he does go full vigilante on him. It's very violent, uh, quite a bit of good gore, and very enjoyable. Nothing that's gonna really stick with you. So I mean, I'm now not even a week on from watching it. I'm struggling to remember a lot of aspects about it, but I do remember enjoying it and remembering gore. So maybe a bit throwaway, but a decent way to spend a couple of hours. I think it was like a couple of hours long and maybe a bit drawn out from what I remember. But decent stuff. Yeah, I quite like that. That's Death Sentence with Kevin Bacon. Next up, Baby, You Can Drive My Car. Sorry, it had to be done. Yes, Drive My Car from 2021, directed by Ryosuke Hamaguchi, starring Hidetoshi Nishijima and Toka Minora. The secret with saying and pronouncing Japanese film names is just say it quick and say it like you know what you're on about, then hope nobody notices. Yeah, I probably just butchered them too. I've had this film for a long, long time on the shelves. It's 2021 film, so I probably bought it a year later and had it for 3 years, and it's been stuck on the shelves. And my good friend Sammy G, he's been on to me numerous times to get this one watched, Roy, saying it'd be right up my street. And at 3 hours long, it's always put me off, and it just goes to show I'm an idiot because this film was magnificent. Maybe the pick of the week, maybe. Yeah, I'm going to go with it. Absolute awesome drama. It's all about this guy here. He's an actor stroke film director, theatre director, and he's had hardship in his life. His young daughter died. His wife died as well. He discovered that his wife was having extramarital relationships, even though it's kind of an odd relationship. You could tell the wife dearly loved him, but for some reason she was carrying on with other guys as well. And although he knew that she was doing that, he always kept it a secret, and the wife didn't realise that he knew. So after his wife's death, he gets the job of going to Hiroshima to direct this play, Uncle Vanya. It's a Chekhov play, a play that he's very familiar as he's acted the main character of the uncle himself many, many times. And the theatre company, they say it's their rules that he's not allowed to drive himself in case anything happens. So they employ a driver for him, which is this girl here, played by Toki Mura. And then the two strike up an unlikely friendship. She's a lot younger than she is. It's nothing sexual, it's a lot purely platonic, because she'd been through a lot in her life herself. So it was the pair of them helping each other with each other's problems and getting this bond of friendship between them. Yeah, just a quite simple but a beautiful story. And at 3 hours long, it didn't drag at all. I mean, Sammy said that it wouldn't drag at all, and he was absolutely right. And the star of the show was actually the car of itself, this beautiful Saab, and I can't remember that. I'm not much of a car guy. I can't remember the model name, Saab 900, something like that. But absolutely beautiful car that had become this guy's car through many years, through 15 years, and had maybe taken a bit of his life with him, like, because this car's been with him so far, so long, like the ups and downs and traverses of life had sort of traversed their way into this car, and the car was part of all of his life as well. Yeah, very, very good film. Probably a lot better than I'm making it sound, but it was awesome stuff. So, yeah, thank you, Sammy, for finally making me watch that. I really did enjoy it. And following that up, Gravity from 2013, directed by Alfonso Cuarón, starring mainly Sandra Bullock, also a bit of George Clooney and a couple of other actors who aren't in it for very long, but it's mainly Sandra Bullock's film. Now, I had watched this before and I didn't really get on with it. It bored me a bit first time watching it, but it just goes to show, stick with a film sometimes, because you can reappraise it, because I really enjoyed it this time. I thought it was excellent. Yeah, as it says on the front, tense, thrilling, and beautiful. It's about this space shuttle crew and Sandra Bullock, George Clooney, and one of the other crew members. They're doing some outside work on the Hubble telescope when the Russians, it seems, accidentally missile one of their satellites in space, which causes it to break up and bits start spinning round orbit and collecting other satellites and stuff like that, and then making this deadly chain of space debris heading their way. And yeah, really good. It's mainly about Sandra Bullock, her trying to find her way home. And I don't know how accurate it would be. I suspect not very. Yeah, something I think you'd have to suspend belief really to believe that the sort of things that she does to enable herself to get back to Earth could really happen. She's only flew in a simulator before, so yeah, yeah, quite unbelievable in places. But like I say, tense, gripping, and I watched it with my headphones on, which was a really good experience. Yeah, really enjoyed it. One that I can now. I was pleased to have it in my collection before, but even more pleased, so to speak. Yeah, Gravity. Up next from 2016, directed by Gary Ross, starring Matthew McConaughey. All right. Gugu Mbatha-Raw, Mahershala Ali, and Kerry Russell. Free State of Jones. Now, when I showed this in one of my shelf videos, not so long ago, only a few days ago, a couple of people mentioned that I should get onto this. One being, I think it was David Mansell and Mark Bushman Blue. They both told me to get to this. I think David has seen it and really liked it, and Mark hadn't seen it and would like to hear my thoughts on it. And David's right. What an absolutely cracking film this is. I really, really enjoyed it. I'm quite interested in the American Civil War anyway, so I don't know why I hadn't got to it. Yeah, it is a war that quite fascinates me, like the waste of men in that war. Like, well, most wars, but in particular this one, absolutely terrible. Yeah, Matthew McConaughey, he's on the Confederate side, but he doesn't agree with slavery. He's against it, and he's a medic because he doesn't really want to kill. So he goes and helps out on the battlefield, trying to patch up the wounded soldiers. When I think it's his nephew is drafted and he's only a young kid, he's like 16 or maybe even younger, and he's injured in his first battle, so he's trying to get his nephew's life saved, but they won't let McConaughey treat his nephew because some officers are injured and they're deemed more important than his nephew. So this is sort of like his final straw, and he absconds from the war, he deserts and starts hiding out in the swamps with other deserters, with runaway slaves, and sort of like a Robin Hood situation where they're in Sherwood Forest getting this band of people together. And then it shows like how badly the Confederates treated like their own people on the Confederate land, like families. They'd absolutely take all their crops to feed the soldiers, take their pigs to kill the soldiers, whilst the big plantation owners, though they could probably afford to keep the war effort going more than the poor families, they leave them alone. And in fact, the plantation owners, if they own 20 or more slaves, and this is a true story, by the way, if they owned 20 or more slaves, they were exempt from, I think, sending their first son off to war, or if they had 40 or more slaves, and any sons the plantation owners had were exempt from war. Yeah, absolutely, double standards, much as life is now. And yeah, this band of deserters and runaway slaves, they sort of band together and take over this area from the Confederates and declare it a free state, and then try and get some help from the Unionists, which doesn't appear. Yeah, really like this film. Really interesting stuff. Don't know how close it is to a true story, but I did feel that it felt like a bit of a history lesson, that I was learning stuff. So hopefully it was. Yeah, like I say, I'm just fascinated by the American Civil War. I have my own views on it, really. I believe that the North aren't as white as they make out, and that the only reason I think that they wanted slavery put an end to was because I know that, like, the South were selling cotton to the British for in the mills to make clothes and stuff like that. And I could imagine with using slave labour that they were asking a lot less than the North were, who were employing people and paying them fairly to get this cotton out. So I could imagine, like, monetary wise, there was a lot to do with it. Yeah, really fascinating subject, and yeah, a film that I really enjoyed. And I was quite surprised then when I looked on Letterboxd that it's much disliked by a lot of people as being preachy, which I didn't think it was preachy at all. I just thought it was interesting, and I was enjoying the story and learning as I went along. Yeah, Free State of Jones. So thank you, David, for and Mark for giving me the push to get that one watched. So after watching Free State of Jones, I was still in that mindset of wanting to maybe explore some more stuff on the subject, slavery and the old America. So I gave Amistad a watch from 1997, directed by Steven Spielberg, and a first time watch. Never seen this one before. Great cast: Morgan Freeman, Nigel Hawthorne, Anthony Hopkins, Jimon Hoso, Matthew McConaughey again, Pete Postlethwaite, Stellan Skarsgård, Chiwetel Ejiofor. Yeah, and I quite enjoyed this one too, to be honest. Again, another true story about these slaves on the ship called the Amistad who managed to break free of their shekels. Shekels or shackles? Shekels is cash, isn't it? Shackles. Managed to break free of their shackles and kill the slavers, apart from a couple of them, and try and make them set sail back for Africa. But the two guys that said they were setting sail for Africa were really heading towards America. And then they get recaptured, and it's the story of what happened to them after that. There's quite a lot of interest in what's going to happen. Are they going to, and it's a court case, are they going to get tried, then get found guilty of murder? But they're described then as things, and things can't murder. There's quite a few groups trying to get ownership back of the slaves. They are purported to have been from the West Indies. Not the West Indies, no, I think it was like Cuba, somewhere around there. They're purported to come from Cuba, which they weren't, they were from Africa. They were trying to fiddle it because African under British control, and slavery had become illegal by the British, so they had to make out that they didn't come from Africa. And then the Spanish government trying to claim the slaves, the guys who were surviving from the ship trying to claim the slaves, the US Navy who took over the ship when it got to American waters. They were trying to claim the slaves as salvage. To set the slaves free would have been very difficult politically, because this is yet just before the American Civil War, and if they set the slaves free, they knew that the South would really reject that notion and maybe the catalyst to start the war. Yeah, quite interesting stuff. A bit dragged out for me. I think the pacing was a bit off, and it did drag a bit for me. It's well over 2 hours. The best bit of the film is at the start when you see the slaves taking over the ship and the brutalness that they killed. That was the best. It never quite get back to them heights for me, but it's all right. It was pretty decent. I enjoyed it. Good film, yeah. Amistad. And to finish the week off, The Deep, written by Jaws author Peter Benchley from 1977, directed by Peter Yates, starring Robert Shaw, Nick Nolte, Jacqueline Bisson, Louis Gossett Jr., Eli Wallach, and my good friend Stuart George sent this on to me because he watched it and he didn't get on with it. I'm glad to report that I liked it a whole lot better than Stuart did. Yeah, I quite enjoyed this. It wasn't the film that I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be them battling like sea creatures, much in the same vein as Jaws. But no, it's totally different. They're all about these young couple diving, Nick Nolte and Jacqueline Bisset. Now, I think Peter Yates, he, how can we put this? He seemed to be like deliberately focusing on the charms of Jacqueline Bissett's frontage, which I'm not going to complain about. It was pretty decent, to be honest, but he did seem to over the top focus on them, particularly in the opening scenes underwater. Yeah, they're this young couple that are diving out on the coast of the West Indies. I think it was Cuba. No, Bermuda. I think not Cuba. What am I on about? Cuba, West Indies, Bermuda. Uh, and they come across this old Second World War ship that's been sunk and find some interesting trinkets from it. When they take it back on land, the likes of the local gangsters are suddenly interested in these trinkets because they're little bottles of morphine and they want to sell it to get people high. And also, Robert Shaw, a local who's into all these treasure hunting and stuff like that, and they believe that it's got far more treasure in it, and this sort of like Robert Shaw, Nick Nolte, Jacqueline Bisset against the Bermudan gangsters, which was really, really good. Eli Wallach is also in tow as a double crossing, double dealing person you can't trust. Where have we heard that before? But he does it well, doesn't he? He got such an expressionable face, Eli Wallach. And yeah, really enjoyable film. The underwater scenes were really, really good. They reminded me a bit of Thunderball, the James Bond film. Yeah, great way to round off the week. So, Stuart, thanks for sending that me over. I'm glad you did get on with it because I really liked it, and it's a great addition to my library. Well, that's it. That's it, guys. That's everything for the week. Mostly good things. I think everything good apart from the bloody awful Flatliners. Yeah. Gives a thumbs up if you've liked what I've done here today. Maybe think about subscribing if you want to hear more of this. You all have a good week, and I'll catch you in a couple of days with a shelf video. See you later. Ta-ra.